The night I graduated from high school was supposed to be the proudest night of my life, but as the auditorium lights dimmed and applause echoed for the top students, I realized something. Pride is worthless when no one is clapping for you. I can still hear my mother's voice, cold and sharp like a broken glass edge. She didn't say it in a whisper. She said it in front of relatives, neighbors, and a few of my classmates who turned their heads just enough to catch the words and hide their smirks. My father didn't defend me. He just adjusted his tie, sighed, and walked away like I was a stain on his carefully ironed reputation. That was the moment something inside me cracked. While my friends took selfies with their parents' bouquets, ribbons, tears of joy, I stood near the auditorium doors alone, clutching a single cheap rose I had bought for myself. No one took my picture. No one said, "We're proud of you." I was background noise in my own story. Later that night, at home, the tension thickened like fog. My parents were laughing with my brother, Daniel, the golden child who had graduated 2 years earlier and was already enrolled in a top university. I placed my graduation cap on the dining table, hoping for at least a nod of acknowledgement. Instead, my father said without looking at me, "You can't live here after summer. We've done enough for you. Daniel has a future. You need to figure out your own." I froze. "What are you talking about?" My mother sipped her wine. "We've decided not to waste more money on you. You're not going to college. You don't have the grades or the looks to do anything that would make us proud." "Looks?" I repeated, confused. She glanced at me like I was a stray cat begging for food. "Sweetheart, in this world, if you're not smart, you better be beautiful, and you are neither." I remember my heart pounding like thunder in my chest. My nails dug into my palms. The floor beneath me might as well have opened into a pit. That was the night I stopped crying in front of them, because they didn't deserve my tears. The next morning, a garbage bag sat by the door with my old clothes inside. A one-way bus ticket was tucked on top. No good. Buy hugs, no tears, just my father's voice from the hallway. I left with nothing but a duffel bag and the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. I arrived in the city 3 hours later. The smell of diesel, damp rain, and burnt coffee filled the air. No one was waiting for me. I sat on a cold bench at the bus station with a few wrinkled bills in my pocket. The world felt too big and I was too small. For the next few months, I slept on couches of people who barely remembered my name. I took any job I could find, cleaning offices at midnight, folding clothes in a discount store, passing out flyers on windy corners. I learned what hunger felt like, real hunger, the kind that makes your head spin and your pride vanish. Every mirror reminded me of their words, ugly, useless, nothing to be proud of, and I believed them for a long time. Then, one rainy night while I was mopping the floor of a cafe, a woman with kind eyes and a paint-stained sweater walked in. She wasn't rich or glamorous, but she smiled at me like I existed. Her name was Mia. She was an artist who rented a small room upstairs. "You're new," she said, taking off her wet scarf. "Want to help me paint tomorrow? It doesn't pay much, but it's warm." That one invitation changed everything. She gave me a place to stay, a paintbrush, and for the first time in my life, a reason to wake up in the morning. Mia taught me to see beauty in broken things. She painted flowers on cracked walls, suns on cloudy days, and hope in places no one cared about. And slowly, very slowly, I began to see beauty in myself, but hope is fragile, and the past has a cruel way of finding its way back. One evening, after a small art exhibit Mia helped me set up, a couple walked in, expensive perfume, polished shoes, familiar voices. My stomach tightened. It was my parents, and they didn't even recognize me at first. When my mother finally did, she froze. My father's smile faltered. I was no longer the ugly high school graduate they threw out. I was the artist standing in a gallery surrounded by my work, my name printed on the wall, but their arrival wasn't for me. They were with a wealthy family, smiling too wide, showing off Daniel's success. They looked at me like I was some ghost from their past that they'd rather keep buried. My father leaned closer, his voice low but sharp. Something inside me burned hotter than shame. It was rage. I smiled. "Oh, don't worry. I'm just the background, remember." Their faces stiffened. I walked away before they could respond, but I felt their presence in the room like poison in the air. That night, I stood on the roof of the building. the city lights reflecting in my wet eyes. For the first time, I wasn't crying from pain. I was crying because I wasn't that broken girl anymore. But a voice in the back of my mind whispered, "They don't deserve to just walk away." And that was the night a seed of quiet revenge was planted in my heart. I spent the next 6 years building a life piece by piece, not just to survive, but to rise. While my parents boasted about Daniel's law degree at fancy dinners, I built a name in the city's art scene. It started small murals in cafes, paintings in basements, selling prints at street markets. Then one day, a local magazine featured my work, calling it the voice of broken souls. That article changed everything. Invitations followed, galleries, commissions, money, but most importantly, power. I didn't want to become famous. I wanted to become undeniable. I rented my own studio. I employed other struggling artists like me. I learned to speak with elegance, walk with power, and dress like the woman I never thought I could become. But the more successful I grew, the more I realized my parents had created this fire in me. And I wasn't done with them. When Daniel's company, my brother's shining achievement, opened a new headquarters downtown, guess who got hired to paint their prestigious lobby mural? Me. When I walked into their building for the first time in a black suit and red lipstick, the receptionist asked my name like I was someone important. My heels echoed against the marble floor, a sound that tasted like victory. Daniel came down to greet me. He hadn't changed much, handsome, arrogant, but his smile faltered when he saw me. "Leela," he whispered, shocked. I tilted my head. "It's a mess, raise now," he stammered. I didn't know, of course you didn't. I cut him off with a smile. "You never cared to look." He offered to catch up, as if years of silence could be erased with coffee. I declined. I was here for business, but inside, I could feel the storm brewing. My parents would soon find out that the ugly, useless girl they threw away now owned the walls of their empire. Over the next months, while painting that mural, I watched their perfect world up close, and that's when I noticed something: cracks. Daniel's company wasn't as stable as it looked. Loans, debt, shady investors. It was a house of cards waiting for a push, and I was holding the wind. During those long nights, alone with my brushes, I'd talk to myself, not out loud but inside. But as time passed, the line between justice and revenge blurred. My father visited the site one afternoon, probably curious to see the artist Daniel kept mentioning. When he saw me, his face went pale. "You," he said, like I was an intruder in his castle. I turned slowly, hands stained with paint. "Me? You have no right to be here," he hissed. "Funny," I said softly. "I own the mural rights for this entire building, so technically I have every right." For the first time, he was the one shrinking. A week later, my mother came to, her perfect hair, her fake smile. She tried to talk to me, calling me sweetheart, like nothing ever happened. I let her words hang in the air like smoke. "Do you know what it's like," I whispered, "to be thrown out like garbage?" Her smile faltered. I continued, "Well, congratulations, the garbage learned how to burn." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. I saw the fear in her eyes, not of me but of what I had become. The mural was finished 2 months later. It wasn't just any mural. It was a story, my story. A girl standing alone while faceless figures turned away. A rose growing through cracks. A storm rising. The unveiling was on a Friday night. Cameras. Press, influencers, investors, and my parents' front row, pretending not to sweat. When I stood on that stage, microphone in hand, I didn't just talk about the art. I talked about rejection, pain, beauty, strength, and without naming names, I made sure every word hit where it hurt. The applause was thunderous. My parents clapped too, out of fear, not pride. But the cliffhanger came a week later, a call from Daniel. His voice was shaking. "Leela, they're going to shut us down." I leaned back in my leather chair, a glass of wine in my hand. "Why?" "The investors pulled out after your speech," he whispered. "They said the story behind the mural made us look bad." I closed my eyes. I hadn't planned for this, but it was happening. The empire they built without me was starting to crumble, and for the first time in my life, I held the power. Daniel's voice echoed in my head for days. "They're going to shut us down." I should have felt triumphant. I should have laughed and said, "Now you know what it feels like." But instead, a strange ache settled in my chest. Revenge tastes sweet in fantasies, but in reality, it leaves a bitter aftertaste. Mia once told me, revenge can make you forget why you started fighting in the first place. And she was right. I didn't paint to destroy them. I painted to prove they were wrong about me. Still, part of me wasn't ready to let go. So when Daniel showed up at my studio, suit wrinkled, eyes hollow, I wasn't surprised. He didn't come as the golden boy. He came as a brother. We're bankrupt, he whispered. Mom and Dad, they're losing everything. I folded my arms. And what does that have to do with me? He looked down, ashamed. Nothing, but they talk about you every day. They can't admit it, but they regret it. Regret. That word hit me harder than any insult. He continued, they never thought you'd become this. They thought throwing you away would make their lives easier, but it didn't. It broke them. I turned away, pretending to be cold. But my reflection in the studio mirror told a different story, one of a girl still carrying scars. That night, I walked alone through the city, past the cafes where I once scrubbed floors, past the bench at the bus station where I first arrived with nothing. 11 years of pain, struggle, and growth lived in those streets. I found myself in front of my parents' house, the house they kicked me out of. The windows were dark, the garden overgrown. It wasn't the palace it used to be. I stood there for a long time, breathing in the cold air, and then the door opened. My mother appeared older, smaller, her hair gray at the edges. She froze when she saw me, no wine glass in hand. No sharp tongue ready, just a woman broken by her own choices. Leela, she whispered, as if saying my name for the first time. My father came behind her, walking slower than I remembered. His voice cracked. You came. I didn't step forward. I just wanted to see. I said softly, see what's left. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We were wrong. The words hung in the night like fragile glass. She continued, we thought if we pushed you away, we could shape our lives into something perfect. But we didn't just lose a daughter. We lost the only person who could have made this house a home. I should have yelled, cursed them, made them beg, but instead I stood there silent. Because sometimes silence is louder than any scream. I don't hate you. I finally said, but I don't owe you anything either. My father lowered his head. My mother sobbed, and for the first time I didn't feel small in front of them. I felt free. I walked away that night not out of hate, but out of power. Because forgiveness is not always about saying it's okay. Sometimes it's about choosing yourself. A year later, Daniel rebuilt his company on smaller but steadier ground. I helped him with art collaborations, not because I owed him, but because I chose to. Mia and I opened our own gallery. I became the woman no one thought I could be, and my parents, they grew old quietly. They never regained their mansion, their perfect image, but they found something else, humility, and from a distance that was enough for me. I visit them on holidays sometimes. Not as the broken girl they threw away, but as the woman they can't stop staring at in awe. And every time I leave, my mother holds my hand a little longer. My father's eyes soften a little more. They may never undo what they did, but I no longer need them to, because I built my own family, my own world, my own name, and I became everything they said I couldn't.